How long after your father passed was this your suicide attempt?
86 months. It was right away because, like, I was lucky. I didn't have any things in my childhood that, any things that scarred me back in the day that made me this way. It was sudden. So it was all new to me. So when that happened, I did not know how to handle it.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik, and welcome to my breakdown. This is the place where we break things down so you don't have to.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you because she knows a thing or two. And now she's gonna break down. So break down. She's gonna break it down.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Ahimsa, pediatrician-designed stainless steel tableware for kids.
Did you know that the chemicals in plastics can interfere with children's hormones, growth, and development? It's science. We do so much to protect our children's health. We feed them healthy food, we buy expensive organic options, but then we serve it on plastic. But a great alternative is stainless steel. It's free of toxic chemicals, and Ahimsa stainless steel tableware has no paint. It won't chip or peel. Nothing's left behind in the food that we or our children eat. We love Ahimsa because it lets us know that our kids are not being exposed to harmful chemicals. The brand Ahimsa, a Sanskrit word meaning avoiding harm, was founded by pediatrician mom, Dr. Manasa Mantravati, to help limit exposure to the harmful plastic chemicals commonly found in kids' feeding products. It's a mission-based brand striving to educate and motivate parents to make simple changes regarding plastic use at home. Go to www.ahimsahome.com and use the code DISH15 and get 15% off your order. Today we're going to be talking to a very exciting guest. Michael Sweetney is a former NBA player. He was drafted the same year as some incredibly famous people.
Couple you might know.
Such as?
LeBron James.
It was a big draft year, 2003. And Michael Sweetney had a very public encounter with depression and actually attempted suicide during his time in training after the sudden tragic loss of his father. And he has really had an incredible life and does really amazing work and is just so articulate. I'm just extremely excited that I get to speak to someone who is in the NBA. I'm a New York Knicks fan.
And if you're listening at home,
if you're not watching us, we are in matching chambray shirts today, but under my shirt is a New York Knicks shirt. For those of you who might be new to our podcast or watching us on YouTube, the man to my right, the Scottie Pippen to my Michael Jordan.
Oh, she went there.
I did.
She hits 3 jump shots, and now she's Michael.
This is Jonathan Cohen. Before we get more into Michael Sweetney, Jonathan, do you want to tell people a little bit more about us?
If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review because it does help us make more. And if you want to check out our matching outfits and my New York Knicks tattoo, because I keep it under my clothes.
I wish.
Instead of parading it around like Mayim does. Check out Mayim's YouTube channel and click the little bell to get notifications for new episodes.
There's some other stats that I wanted to just kind of put out there. And I don't want to overwhelm us all with numbers, but the most common mental disorder in athletes is depression, even more than in the general population. Because you might be saying like, well, it's just a sampling of humanity. True. But it's 26% for former elite athletes compared to 1 in 5. Is that right?
That is right.
So slightly more than in the general population.
Mayim, read us the stat about people ages 10 to 34, because that one just blew my mind.
Well, first, before I tell the stat about ages 10 to 34, the total suicide rate increased between 1999 and 2018. So that's almost, is that 10 years by the math? Yeah. It increased 35%. That's astounding.
It's not a good metric.
And one of the other metrics is like depression is the cause of over, 2/3 of reported suicides. I mean, typically people who commit suicide are depressed, suicidally depressed. But there sometimes are, other factors. But suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34. Now, you might be thinking, well, not that many people are dying necessarily from 10 to 34, but yes, they are. The second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34. There are 2.5 times more suicides than homicides in the United States. But the notion that, athletes are part of a significant portion of our society, our entertainment and our economy, and that depression or mental health challenges in general in that community might be looked at as a detriment is I think something very significant, and that's what we're going to talk about with Michael Sweetney. Jonathan, do we have a word of the day?
We do have a word of the day.
Word of the day.
So the word of the day today, like many of our words of the day, is kind of a bit of a concept. Michael mentions it in the episode. He said he was a professional masker. What does
that mean?
What does that mean? Professionally masking or just masking?
Well, let's put professional aside for now. The concept of masks is not, this isn't like an elaborate clinical DSM. Mayim got a PhD so she could explain this word to you. But the concept of the masks we wear is something that has been kind of taken on in many fields of conversation about our mental health. Do you know people who act like everything's fine, but you know that nothing's fine?
That's what I do in this podcast chair.
Pretty much. We refer to those people as, wearing masks. I mean, we all wear masks, and this is something also in feminist circles. We talk a lot about the masks women wear in particular, but we all wear masks. There's a way that we behave when we go to work, and there's a way that we behave when we're with our partner, and there's a way that we behave with people on the street. But there are times in our life, and as an actor person, I feel this intimately, where we have to put on a mask of being okay, even when we're not. There are people who are not actors who have learned this as a skill. It's a coping mechanism. It's usually a survival mechanism. And it's different for everyone. Michael has a very specific situation that he was in surrounding his father's death. But sometimes if people grow up in abuse, you learn to not show that you're hurt. Often if you grow up in a home where there's alcoholism or mental health and parents or caregivers are exceptionally consumed or busy with their own stuff, you learn to not make trouble. There's kind of 2 responses to that as a child. You either make a lot of trouble or you learn to make no trouble and kind of not be seen and wearing a mask, and not showing really what's going on is a way to protect yourself. Also, if you come from a highly critical home, wearing a mask is a way to not have a constant intrusiveness by a parent that might be overbearing or terrifying.
But what is the danger of professionally masking or constant masking?
When our guest talks about being a professional masker, what he means is that he was an expert, that under the most difficult circumstances, he was still able to keep that up. Most people will crack before that. And that's just being human. We all have to, these are all levels, these are levels of this. But what happens when you mask is that it extends the amount of time between you having an issue and getting help. Because you start, essentially, that mask becomes part of who you are. And you stop even registering, in many cases, what you're feeling or how you're feeling. It can be very, very dangerous. And if you have a partner with whom you're still kind of wearing that mask, this also happens with people who are closeted, and who are in relationships with people and they're trying to make it work as a heterosexual or whatever it is. The space between you and other people increases, and sometimes it's intangible. But Michael's story is really a beautiful example of what happens when you have the support when you remove that mask and how, liberating it can be. So anyway, that's a little bit about masking. It is a real pleasure to welcome Michael Sweetney. He's an American basketball player. He played basketball for Georgetown University before being drafted to my New York Knicks in 2003. He was then traded to the Bulls. Actually, we didn't even get into that. Traded to the Bulls. That's the Scottie Pippen Jordan connection that I didn't even realize. And he also has served for the past several years as the assistant coach for Yeshiva University's men's basketball team. We'll talk all about that with him. That's right, Yeshiva University. That's an Orthodox university in New York. He also served for some time as the head coach of the girls' varsity basketball team at Ramaz, which is a religious girls' school. He's not Jewish, I should just say that, but his connection with the Jewish community is also something that we will talk about. I'm so excited right now to welcome Michael Sweetney. Break it down.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Huge fan of yours, by the way.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
okay. So we're obviously, we have so many things that I want to talk to you about. And I'm a huge basketball fan. And it's also, I've said for many years that in my next life, I want to come back as an NBA basketball player. So it's just a real honor to get to speak to someone who, has walked a path that so many of us, can only dream of. And I just think I respect so much what you've also done with your voice. I was raised on the Knicks of the late 80s and early 90s. So, I was raised with Patrick Ewing as sort of like the pinnacle of...
That's my mentor, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm freaking out, Michael. I'm freaking out. So, I was raised like baseline jumper was like, that was the image of my childhood was, watching with my father of blessed memory. So I was raised in New York, Nick. My parents are from the Bronx, and I was raised to root for New York teams. And also I rooted for the Knicks when, there was a tremendous amount of glory, about that team. And, I was a Starks fan, like all the good things, And so, your journey also in particular is very, kind of close to my heart just from that kind of perspective. But maybe you can tell us just a little bit about, like, how'd you get there? Like, how do you get, like, what's that trajectory like? Where'd you grow up? What was it like? Were you raised in kind of a sports community? Was it clear you were athletic? Like, I want to know in my next life what I should prepare. What was your life like to kind of put you on that path?
So I'm from Oxon Hill, Maryland. It's a city in Prince George's County, about 20 minutes from DC, 45 minutes from Baltimore. I grew up there with my mom and dad. I had an older brother, and I started playing basketball at the age of 9. And to be honest with you, I hated basketball when I first started playing. My father wanted me to be active and give me something to do. He decided to put me in basketball. I hated going to practice. I hated the games because at the beginning, I didn't really know how to play. I was kind of clumsy, still trying to figure it out. And I was kind of embarrassed because everybody else was much better than me. So I just didn't like it for the first couple of years. And then I had a young coach, Coach Gerald Moore. He's one of my first coaches. And he instilled this confidence in me where, hey, you can do anything. You can keep working at it. Just keep working. And I see so much potential in you. I'm like, what is he seeing me? And I'm like, what is he seeing? And he's like, your footwork. I just see things that you can get better at. And he just, continuously just put that in my head, and I worked. And next thing you know, went to high school, and as a freshman, I made varsity. And that was kind of a big thing because my high school team, we had an All-American. We had some good players. So I made freshman as a varsity, got some good playing time. And then for my sophomore year, things just blossomed. I became, averaged like 20 points.
Wow.
And life's changed for me my sophomore year. Legendary late coach John Thompson, Georgetown, who recently passed away. He came to one of my high school games, and this is a crazy story. Everybody think I'm crazy about it. So he came to one of my high school games, and I'm like, what is he doing here at the game? I'm thinking he's there recruiting somebody else. And I'm a sophomore in high school. He comes to one of my high school games, and I think he's there recruiting somebody else. So after the game, my father said, hey, Coach Thompson's here to see you. I was like, oh, really? And he's like, this was like on maybe like a Wednesday or Thursday. He's like, yeah, Saturday morning we have to go down to the school and visit. So I'm like, whoa, this is a whole thing. So next thing you know, I get down there. Coach Thompson, we have a meeting. It's unofficial visit. So we have a meeting. It's like, hey, this is what we all about here. Georgetown. He points to a wall with Patrick Ewing, Allen Iverson, Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Moore. He showed me like all their jerseys. He's like, I believe that you're next. And, people say stuff, but he told me as a sophomore, he said it so conventionally, I believed him. And so a lot of people who don't know basketball, know the ins and outs. So right then and there on the spot, I committed to say I'm coming to Georgetown.
Wow.
Usually kids wait till their senior year to like say, hey, this is where I'm going. And they take visits. I didn't visit no other school. It was my first visit.
Wow.
He convinced me so much. I committed, and my high school coach and a lot of my coaches, they were upset. Like, why would you make the decision now? I was like, he believed in me. It's something I don't know. It's a feeling. I don't know what it is, but he believes in me. And I stuck with it. Other schools, try to recruit and say, I was like, nope, I'm going to Georgetown. And went to Georgetown, and he actually retired my senior in high school. He promised me he will still be around. He kept that promise. And I went into college as a freshman, was a starter, an All-American my 3 years, had a great career. And after my junior year, I had the hard decision to make whether to come back for my senior year or turn pro. And I decided to turn pro in the infamous, amazing 2003 NBA draft. You guys might have heard of a guy named LeBron James, but
yeah, it was a big year. Okay, wait. So hold on. So what did you always play the same position?
Yeah, so I played power forward. I was always the big guy that they would put me under the basket. So I played power forward and center. I kind of switched positions depending on the team.
How tall were you in your sophomore year?
So my sophomore year, and that's the thing, the crazy part, I was 6'3", 6'4" at the time.
Wow.
So I wasn't even finished growing at the time. So I was like 6'3", 6'4". And then I had a crazy growth spurt where I grew like 3 or 4 inches, and I ended up being like 6'8". You see, a lot of my family, not many people are really tall. So I'm the one that's kind of tall. So it's one of those things where I had a crazy growth spurt. And so I went from 6'4" to 6'8", and then that kind of changed everything with my position. I'm 6'8", and then guys are like 7 feet, 7'2" that I'm playing against. So I'm kind of at a disadvantage. So luckily I'm a bigger guy, so I was able to use my body. So that kind of helped me a little bit.
Okay, so Jonathan, do you have any? I got a million questions, but go ahead.
No, you keep going. It's the 6'8" undersized power
That's
forward
right.
story.
This is Michael Sweetney's story. He was 6'8" and still felt like a tiny, tiny man.
Yes.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by BetterHelp.
Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp can assist your needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist who you can start communicating with in under 48 hours. It's professional therapy done securely online. They have a broad range of expertise available that may not be locally available in many areas. It's for worldwide clients. You can log into your account anytime. You can send a message to your therapist, and you get timely and thoughtful responses, and you can schedule video or phone sessions. I actually signed my mom up for BetterHelp. She was so excited with how easy it was to communicate, and she did. She started communicating right away. She sends a lot of messages, but I think you're allowed to do that. Visit BetterHelp.com/break. That's better HELP, and join the over 2 million people who've taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. So many people have been using BetterHelp. They're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And we have a special offer for our Mayim Bialik's Breakdown listeners. What is it, Jonathan?
Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/break. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Rothy's.
It's 2021, Jonathan. You know what no one has time for?
What's that?
Uncomfortable shoes. That's where Rothy's comes in. Rothy's surveyed thousands of customers. The number one word used to describe their shoes? Comfy. They have a unique seamless design. It's insanely comfortable. Their fan favorite styles are sustainably made with materials like plastic, water bottles, and they're fully machine washable. They come in tons of shapes, styles, and colors. They have flats, loafers, and sneakers, sandals. They also have washable bags that are perfect for any getaway you're going on. Rothy has also started making men's shoes, which are intentionally designed with an artisanal level of detail, and they're created with nearly zero waste. They're durable, washable, and better for the planet. Step up your wardrobe with washable, sustainable, stylish shoes and bags from Rothy's. Go to rothys.com/breakdown to find your new favorites today.
That's rothys.com/breakdown. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Daily Harvest.
This time of year means my schedule gets crazier and busier. I love food. Most of us do. But when I'm swamped thinking about what's for lunch, let alone actually finding time to shop, even online, it can feel almost impossible. Thanks to Daily Harvest, my freezer is always stocked with delicious options that are ready in minutes. They deliver harvest bowls, flatbreads, smoothies, and more. They're all based on organic fruits and vegetables, and they're delivered right to your door. They take minutes to prepare. They don't use preservatives, added sugar, or artificial anything. I really love the flatbreads.
Oh,
There's
those are
one,
good.
you liked it too. There was like cabbage on it. It was so freaking good. Daily Harvest Bowl is the perfect comfort food meal on chilly fall days. They're ready in minutes.
Enjoy this time of year even more like we do with Daily Harvest. Go to dailyharvest.com and enter code BREAKDOWN to get up to $40 off your first box. That's code BREAKDOWN for up to $40 off your first box at dailyharvest.com. That's dailyharvest.com.
Okay, so I guess one of the things that I'm interested about, which does lead to, different aspects of your story later on, like this is a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, being an athlete, especially at the level that you're talking about, like the level of just, first of all, like I feel it in my body, how exciting that must have been. Like you were a kid and you were taken to Georgetown. I mean, like that's an unbelievable feeling, but there's also a tremendous amount of pressure. Like, do you remember what that felt like as a teenager?
Oh, it was a lot of pressure, especially my freshman year in college. We had a good year. We went to the Sweet 16. And then I think once that was over and going into my sophomore year, that's when I felt the pressure because they was like, look, the team is yours, carry us. And I was like, wow. And then obviously me being from that area, being from, Georgetown is in Washington, D.C., which is not too far from home for me. So that was a lot of pressure. I got all my friends and family back home, like, hey, bring Georgetown back to, where things are great. So I'm, feeling that pressure. And also being a student athlete. A lot of people don't understand that is one of the hardest parts too, because Georgetown is a very, very hard school education-wise. And just being honest, coming from a public school, I wasn't really prepared. So it was very tough on me, and they didn't play. Wasn't the stereotype was like, oh, you don't have to go to class. We didn't have that. So it was very, very tough school academically and trying to perform on a course. So it was tough. Like I didn't have a life.
We think of the LeBrons and, for those of us who watched The Last Dance and cried every episode, there's this beauty to that fantasy of the fame and the girls and the women and, all those things. But what's underneath it is this tremendous exhaustion, right? You are pushing your body physically. And one of the things Jonathan and I really talk about a lot on this podcast is there's a connection between your mind and your body. So if your body is being pushed to those limits, you have to find some way, for your mind to be able to handle it. And if your mind is being stressed, it also takes a toll on your body. So tell us a little bit about sort of what your mind-body experience was, meaning did you go to classes and then you'd work out all day? Like what was your schedule like, especially in college?
Well, in college, most of my classes start about 8:15, 8:30, around that range. So a lot of times at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm in the gym, get me a good workout in with running, lifting weights, shooting, whatever it may be. So I give me a good hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, hard workout, intense workout in, shower, grab some breakfast, go to class all day. Class is over about 4-ish, 4:30. Go from class to actual practice. That's just what I did in the morning was just something just extra to kind of get myself over the edge. But then I'll have to go join my team's practice for 3 hours. In college practices are like 4:30 to 7:30. Then you got study hall after that and dinner. So you don't see your dorm room until 9 o'clock at night sometimes later than that. So it's all day. It's just pretty much all day, and it's a grinding. And so Coach Elliott Simons, he said, you guys gotta have a little, not using the word loosely, but a little crazy in you, to have that mindset, because a lot of people can't just do that. And and I'm sure you in your business, once you have a passion and love for something, you do anything to succeed and do what you got to do. So sometimes it takes that, you got to sacrifice not hanging out with your friends or not doing certain things you love to do.
Totally. But I also feel like, your business is your body, right? It's everything, everything you eat, everything you take in, whether you decide to smoke pot or not, all those things, right? All those things have an impact on, that kind of pressure sounds so terrifying.
When I was coming into college, I had I was kind of considered overweight a little bit. So I was, 300 something pounds. So I had to lose 40 pounds. Yeah. So you listen to everybody saying, oh, you're this, you're that. So now it became a psychological thing with me, because I hated getting on the scale to see the numbers, Like that, I was terrified. So I said, you got to weigh in. I immediately like go into a panic attack in my brain. So like that, and just knowing like, certain foods, like, oh, I want to do this. Oh man, I got to get on the scale tomorrow. So it's like you have these mental things that really, it takes its toll on you mentally. Like that, like you said, go back to the pressure part. Like I want this, but I know I can't have it.
So, and this is also this is what blows my mind. This is true really for every player who's playing at this level. Meaning when you think about, I follow LeBron James on Instagram, in every picture, he's like looking dope. It's like King LeBron. And like, he looks amazing, but he had to go through this too. Like everyone in the NBA is subject to this kind of training, schedule, pressure. And then it really just depends kind of on individual variability in like how you handle it. You seem like a sensitive guy. Were you always kind of a sensitive guy?
If you ask my wife, yeah, I'm a very sensitive guy. She said, you wear your heart on your sleeve so much. Like, I'm a very sensitive. I always care about what people think about me. Always cared about, if I'm received in a positive way. So I try to please other people. So definitely a very sensitive guy. So like, that stuff, you try to, it carries over for sure.
When did you meet your wife?
So we went to high school together.
Stop it.
Yeah, yep. I met her.
It.
Yes, I met her in high school. I was a freshman and she was a sophomore. And
older lady.
Yeah, she's an older lady. I always tell her she's my cougar. She just rolled her eyes at me, by the way. But I told her she's my cougar. But no, we met in high school. She was the manager of the basketball team. But the funny part, so here's the thing. We were in high school. We were best friends. We were just like best friends. I kind of had a crush on her. We can tell we liked each other, but we both had a boyfriend and girlfriend. But it was just like we just had this bond that both of our boyfriend and girlfriends, and they hope they didn't watch, they probably upset me, but both of our boyfriend and girlfriends kind of knew that we just were meant to be together. So it was kind of one of those things like, and I'm glad we stayed friends in high school because we probably wasn't ready to. And so once I went to college, that's when we started dating and, things took off from there.
Let's get to the 2003 draft. Tell us what the draft was like. Like, what's that like, and how did that go for you?
The draft process was, it was amazing to say the least. When I was, because I kind of did something where, I think the rules have changed at the time. I didn't sound the agent right away. So all the teams came to me and worked out. I didn't have to work out against any other players. I was just working by myself, which people think it's easier, but it's not. Because usually you got 4 other guys, they can watch this guy, watch that guy. I got teams come to me and it's just me to work out. I got me, the president, the general manager, sometimes the owner, the whole upper management staff is watching you work. All you see was their arms folded watching you. No smiles, no shaking the head. So I'm like, do they not like the workout? They not like it. So like it's tough, and they put you through a grueling workout. I'm talking about pretty much most teams put you through a workout until you break. They want to see how far they can go, what's your mental like. They ask you, kind of weird questions like, if something was a fire, who would you say first, a cat or a woman?
Oh, like they're testing like logic and ethics and
it's like, they test all that stuff. So it's a grueling process mentally and physically. But it was amazing. I think once we got to New York for the draft, it was crazy because the Knicks, I didn't know it. I had no clue they were taking me because they brought me in the morning of the draft and they met with me at the Garden, asked me like 2 questions. I was like, okay, all right, you're dismissed. So I was like, wow, okay, that was weird. I was like, back in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that's not a team I'm not going to.
Right.
And so I'm just, just watching all the guys like LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Carmelo Anthony. I'm just watching all of them just going through the process. And, with them, they already knew. Like LeBron know he's the one. Carmelo, they already know where they're going. So they kind of like set on this since they just having a good time. Me, I'm nervous. I'm really not knowing. I'm from Washington, from the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, but I don't know where I'm about to be living for the rest of my life. It's like really one day you're here in New York, and then you're like trying to figure out where am I going to be living. And for the rest of my life, it's all on somebody else's decision. So that was a tough call. And just sitting there watching the names being called, you're just sitting there nervous.
I feel it. I feel it right now. I'm
just sitting there nervous, like, wow, what has happened? Like, okay, and then like the 8th pick comes. And after the 8th pick was taken, the Knicks are on the board, and my agent gets a phone call. He's like, hey, the Knicks just called me and said they're taking you.
I'm so excited.
So he's like, the Knicks are taking you. When they call your name, act excited. Like you're surprised, so that's, that's the thing. I shouldn't be giving that information out, but a lot of players kind of know right then and there if they're getting ready to be taken. Some do, some don't, but most do. And he told me, they're about to call your name, act surprised. I was like, okay, cool. And So as soon as he told me the Knicks were taking me, I knew the history of the draft picks. They booed. So I'm like, oh, this is my greatest. I'm like, this is one of my dreams I worked so hard for, like, wow, I'm about to get booed because I knew it was coming. And they said, David Stern came. He was like, the Knicks select 9th pick Michael Sweetney from Georgetown. The crowd was like, yeah. I'm like, whoa, okay, they cheered. And I was like, wow, I actually got a cheer. So that made me feel good. And I walked across the stage, shook his hand. The first thing I saw was my mom and dad.
Oh, God.
Stands crying. It was an amazing experience. So I thank Patrick Ewing to this day for that, because him being a legend, being from Georgetown, that saved me from getting booed. For sure. So
you're picked, and now you're a Knick. So tell us kind of what happened next in terms of your life and your mental health.
So I get picked by the Knicks. As soon as we got picked, the next week we go to Summer League, and Summer League is where all the teams get together with their rookies and free agents. They play in the league. So I did that for about 2 weeks, and then took a couple weeks off, and then so a week before the season, we do this thing called rookie transition, where they teach about finances and how to balance family time and all that, just whatever. So my phone gets ringing during that, and I get a call that my father, who was my best friend, person that introduced me to the game of basketball, was my everything, had died of a massive heart attack. My father was the person that introduced me to the game of basketball. Never missed a practice, never missed a game. I just talked to him that morning, and all of a sudden he's gone. And that was like devastating. So we kind of came home, and we had the funeral, and the team said, hey, people was like, take some time off. I said, no, I want to use basketball because that's my outlet. So told me to take some time off, and I didn't do it. I decided I was going to use basketball as my outlet, and it didn't go in my favor, obviously. That's when I learned that basketball was a business.
First of all, I mean, so I what a loss. Also at such a profound time in your life, and I'm trained as a neuroscientist. So, the brain can only hold so much. So also when you're dealing at that level of excitement, adrenaline, all those things, that fall is much greater, meaning the fall that we all experience when we experience, grief. But that must have felt so, that's completely out of control, and there's only so much that a human can hold.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Sakara.
I've found that feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you not just eat healthy, but truly enjoy it with chef-crafted, plant-rich meals that build a foundation for radiant health. I love Sakara because their food is good for you, and it tastes like it's not good for you. That's how good it tastes. Sakara is actually a nutrition company that focuses on overall wellness. They have organic, ready-to-eat meals made with powerful plant-based ingredients. They're designed to minimize sugar cravings, boost your energy, improve digestion, and even get your skin looking better. Along with plant-rich meals, they also have daily wellness essentials like supplements, and I really like their teas, to support your overall nutrition. Experience their best-selling Metabolism Super Powder and Metabolism Super Bar to control sugar cravings, reduce bloating, boost energy, and reduce fatigue. Right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off your first order when you go to sakara.com/break. or enter the code BREAK at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/break to get 20% off your first order.
Sakara.com/break. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Away.
Away is a modern lifestyle brand that creates thoughtful products for every traveler and every kind of trip. They started with the perfect suitcase, but they didn't stop there. That suitcase had so many features to make travel seamless, but now travel looks different than it used to. Away has a range of suitcases, bags, and accessories you can take whenever you take that trip. I cannot wait to go essentially anywhere, and Away is the way that I would like to travel because I'm the kind of person who just always uses a crummy bag that doesn't fit everything and it's not helpful. All of their suitcases are designed to last a lifetime. Your Away bag, you do not like to part with it. You take it just from one room to the other just because it looks so good and is so helpful. Every suitcase comes with an interior organization system and a hidden removable laundry bag that separates your dirty clothes. They also have, I know it sounds silly, 4 360-degree wheels. It makes a big difference because it rolls smoother.
Start your 100-day trial and shop the entire Away lineup of travel essentials, including their best-selling suitcase at awaytravel.com/MBB. That's awaytravel.com/MBB.
My father died, it'll be 6 years ago.
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear that.
No, thank you. I just, I remember that first week, I was like walking on jelly. Like, that's what it felt like, like I was just like, I wasn't even in my body. And, grief looks different for everyone. But I remember how much I wanted to be able to put myself into things and also found it so incredibly, difficult's not even the word. It's like you're being asked to stand up straight when you feel like falling down. So I can't even imagine, also to be in that high pressure situation and to be surrounded by that. So, obviously you're a sensitive person, but you had never experienced, let's say, depression per se. I mean, you've already indicated, I don't mean to psychoanalyze you, but you've indicated some things about, being concerned about what other people think of you or wanting to please people. Those are sometimes markers of someone who just has like a little bit of tenderness and sensitivity to them. But you had never experienced like depression as a teenager. This was new to you, correct?
Yeah, this is definitely all new. And I think for me, what kind of happened, I understood what it was when it kind of hit me. But I just, at the time and back in 2003, it wasn't nothing that was talked about how it is now. It wasn't comfortable. And I always use this as an example, Ron Artest, AKA Meta World Peace. People deemed him as this crazy person. He was just so whatever. And like, I've had many conversations, one of the nicest people in the world. Like, he's an amazing person. Obviously he probably does whatever, I don't know what he battles, but he has, whatever he battles with. And, I was like, wow, if I'm barely in the NBA, so obviously at the time when I was with the Knicks, I wasn't getting the minutes I wanted to get. I was in a business situation where they drafted me, but they had, 4 other people in my position making way more money than me. So I wasn't going to see the floor. So it was just tough where I just wasn't even getting the chance I wanted to get. It was a bad situation. So, just hated, at that time, I hated basketball. I hated going to practice, hated work. So I had that, then going home, dealing with the loss of my father. So everywhere I went, there was no real peace, no outlet. And then, and I never spoke up about it. So, time and time, kicked in. Next thing you know, I found myself being suicidal. For myself trying to take pills to take my life and just shutting off my family. And the thing is with me, so I'm going to tell you something, how I was different. I was what you call a professional master, where I was this way behind closed doors, but in person, I'm smiling, I'm joking. Oh, life is amazing. I'm good. I hit it well. And still to this day, people are like, I never knew. Because I took pride in making sure nobody knew what I was going through. The only person that really knew, even my mom didn't know. She knew something, but she couldn't put her hand on it because she wasn't around me. But she was my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, she was with me every day. So she saw it. She saw me being at this point to like at the lowest point of my life. And she, honestly, she battled it with me. So she kind of saw it and just stuck by my side.
So you were in grief. I mean, you were grieving, and also, for a lot of reasons, you were also in a work situation, this is your job, where you're also not kind of getting what you need. And at the same time, not having necessarily the emotional strength to be able to manage it. Like, that's like, it's kind of a perfect storm. How long after your father passed was this, your suicide attempt?
Maybe 6 months. It was right away. Cause like, I never, growing up, I really didn't have to really deal with much besides trying to work hard and get playing time basketball wise. I didn't really have to deal with much, I was lucky. I didn't have any things in my childhood that, any things that scarred me back in the day that made me this way. It was sudden. So it was all new to me. So when that happened, I did not know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle that adversity. I didn't know what to do. And at the time, I kind of knew what I should have done. I should have spoke up and asked for help, but I was scared because I felt like, wow, I'm going to be out the league. I'm going to be dealing with this person. And so I was scared. Like, you go back to what you were saying, I was scared what people would think about me.
Well, and this is something that Jonathan and I have really taken notice of in particular, the world of sports. I mean, I think it started also with the conversation around traumatic brain injury in football, where we started having a different perspective on how we view sports and interact with athletes. Because, and look, Spike Lee has talked about this for decades and decades, this is something that we get to experience for our entertainment and pleasure. We watch people play sports. It's very pleasurable. And there's a lot of complexity to that as well. But when we started talking about traumatic brain injury, it was the first time that I remember hearing people say, well, that's what they do for a living, serves them right, And the conversation started shifting as it needed to, that there are people. These are people. These are not just athletes whose job it is to entertain us and to do what we want, when we want, the way we want, and then sell us shoes and sell us cereal and soda pop, right? These are people. And I think we've seen it. I mean, Jonathan, every time there's an article of someone in the NBA, who's spoken up about mental health. I mean, Jonathan, do you want to speak to it?
The conversation has just changed. 2003 was a different world from where we are now, with the NBA cares and Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan and even Paul George speaking openly about experiences of depression, players in the bubble last year talking about how difficult it was for them. I don't think a player's internal psychological state as it relates to their emotional wellness was something that was in the conversation or allowed to be back when you were in the league. I don't know. You would know much more.
It definitely wasn't. Mental health definitely wasn't in the conversation back then. So it wasn't even thought about. Like I said, it was like the one person that even mentioned, like I said, Ron Artest. I remember he won his championship with the Lakers. And then one of the first things he did was thank his therapist. And everybody laughed at him.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you laughing? Like, he's thanking his therapist because his probably, who knows what he was going through that year. And his therapist probably got him through that season and got him through, whatever he was going through. And people was like, laughed at him. So like, even then it was laughed upon. So now people are starting to get a little sensitivity and really starting to understand, like, okay, these are people, but you still got people out there where I hear it all the time where if some athletes speak up, you hear people, oh, he makes, $30 million a year. How can he be unhappy? Yeah. So like money can't, get you out of depression. Money can't get you out of a mental state. If you're trying to go play in a game and your mom is at home bailing in a deathly illness or something, like I've seen, a player do that. Like he's battling, he's living in one city, his mom is another city, and his mom is on her deathbed. Like you can't, I don't care if I got $100 million sitting in front of me. That has nothing to, that's not going to fix what's inside. So a lot of people would try to put the money part in part. Like you always say, like you just said, we're still in the day, we're still human. Whether you got $1 or $100 million, you are human and you're going to feel certain things. So I think hopefully people start to understand that athletes, and not even just athletes, entertainers, whether it's, actors and singers, like it's all, like I said, you're taught to entertain, and sometimes people forget who you are as a person.
Yeah. And I think in this sense, like mental health is it's the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. This is something that we all have to, and I guess get to share together. Was your experience that there was kind of a safety? Meaning, like, did you feel safe when you could be distracted when you were playing, or did it feel just like crazy in your head all the time?
For sure. Definitely it was a distraction. Those 2 hours on the court where you're just battling, playing basketball, because sometimes your mind is on the basketball. But I'd be a liar to sit here and say that sometimes I'm on the free throw line, I'm on the bench, it doesn't cross my mind like, man, what's my father's here? Or how's my mom doing? Like, oh yeah, it crosses your mind, but it is a distraction for a little bit when you get those couple hours where it can not be on your mind all the time. But it definitely helps a little bit.
Well, and, I am nowhere near the level of athlete that you are, but I know that when I'm even just a little bit distracted and I'm trying to sink a shot, like I can't do it. And I think of the level of training that you and those at that level, you go through a level of training where you're supposed to be able to set everything aside, just leave it. But you sometimes will see a game where it's like, something's wrong with that player. Like they're off. And I always wonder, like, they got a whole world in there, And that's part of what that training is that they put you through, right? How much can you take? And that's where, NBA stars are not like the rest of us, because there is a level of resilience that allows you to get to sitting in a draft hall. Like, I don't get there. That's never going to be, in my next life.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, like about the draft hall. Like, for instance, like going through the draft process, like for everybody on the TV, it's entertainment. Oh, we don't see who gets picked, but back in line, like some guys me, I kind of knew I was going to get picked. I knew I wasn't going past a certain number, But there are certain guys that don't want the embarrassment of not being picked.
Oh, that would kill me. It would kill me.
Yeah, just imagine it has happened where a guy's been sitting there for, almost hours, just sitting there and watching other people being taken. And sometimes people being taken that's not even there. And you're just sitting there like by yourself, like, wow. And that's humiliating.
Totally.
So like, it takes a toll, people, like I say, a lot of things are for entertainment for other people, but you forget that, guys are human. It's a tough business.
So tell me, after you had this, at a certain point, you moved around a little bit, and then at a certain point, you really shifted your life. Can you tell us about sort of the decision? Was that something you and your wife decided together? Like, how did you get into this next phase of life?
I think what happened, the biggest thing for me was her mentioning that she was pregnant with my oldest. And that was right then where I knew I had to make a change, because I knew what my father was to me. Growing up, my father was an amazing father and, great example. He was just a good person. And I knew what I had to be. So I had to do the work. I had to get the counseling, had to get the help, had to, get my spiritual life back. Growing up, my father, put in me spiritual. He put, good, having a good spiritual life carries you a long way. And when I was going through my depression, going through everything I was going through, I was so mad at everything. I was mad at God, and I was mad, I was just, anything you could think of, I was just angry at. And once I put all that stuff that I grew up on back into my life, it kind of helped a lot. I learned how to deal with, things, anxiety and depression. If it even comes my way now, I even know how to deal with it. Which it won't even get to a point where I'm on overdrive, because I learned how to talk and open up more now, whereas I might drive my wife crazy sometimes because I talk so much, I know I can't hold stuff in. So I try to get it out and start talking more. So that helped me kind of shift my life. And now probably in the best headspace I've ever been in my life.
That's so amazing. And also I love how much, how much clarity you have, that like, these are the steps that you took. So if you can just kind of one by one. So you got into therapy. Was that something you did?
So here's the thing. So I went to, once I mentioned to my agent at the time that I was going through something, I needed help. I kind of quit basketball. So I was like, look, I'm not going back to NBA. I need help. And he got me with a counselor. The first counselor I went to wasn't for me. At the time, so rewind back in running telling my age a little bit, but so at that time, insurance didn't cover your, so I had to pay for it out of pocket. So every time I would go, the person I was seeing, he was like, all right, cut the check, time to go. So I felt like I was just there for a check, and it was just, I get it, it's a business, but I didn't feel comfortable. So I started telling this person what they wanted to hear and all that stuff. So he kind of like, once in a while, we kind of went different ways, and I had to find another avenue. And mine was taking a job to Uruguay, South America. So I took a job to play basketball overseas. Something kept me pushing me to take this job. And I went over there, and I kind of met with someone that really took the steps where it was like all day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, where I kind of had my breakthrough and I understood, I accepted my father's death. I accepted the way my career ended, because when you Google my name, he's this fat guy, he's a bust, he didn't do what he was supposed to do. I found a way to drown all that out, and I kind of just took the steps. And me, to be honest, sit here and say that it happened right then and then, no. So those 4 months me being overseas, I still had to do the work. I'm still doing work now. It's work. It's not you go see a therapist. If you go see a therapist for an hour, you still got to do the work those other 23
the rest of
hours.
The week.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was a whole work process for me, and I took the time. Like I said, with prayer and obviously a good family support system helped me.
Are you're a religious person?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Were you raised Christian? Like, what's your?
So, I was raised Catholic.
Oh wow!
But, once I met my wife, that changed, and we started going to a church where it was kind of like a non-denominational. We kind of believe in God and believe in living the right way. And I kind of not saying keep it simple, but believing in God, living the right way, and that's yeah.
I don't want to get too personal, but I am curious. Like, do you have a prayer schedule? Do you pray before meals? Do you pray when you wake up? Like, what's your consciousness of God just on a daily basis that you feel kind of keeps you centered?
I have a Bible. I have an app called the Holy Bible app. And so probably I actually not do it every day, but every so often it gives me different I have like a 7-day plan, a 12-day plan, 21, 5-day. So every day switches to, something different, but it's definitely every morning I wake up, I try to get it done. Some mornings I'll get in a rush and I forget, but I try to make sure I do it before noon. That's my goal. Me and my wife, we make sure we pray before meals and also pray at night before our kids go to bed. So we just try to, instill in our kids. And, sometimes even before meals, I will forget to say grace and my kids will make sure, we forgot to say grace. So.
How old are your kids now?
They're 10, 8, 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 10, 8, 6, I have 2 boys and a little girl.
Oh, that's sweet. So the other thing and kind of the way that we got connected is you ended up coaching, and you are a coach at Yeshiva University, which many people don't know is the largest Orthodox university in the country, and many of my friends went there. It's a place that I know very well. I have many friends who are graduates of YU. So you were really inserted into a completely Orthodox environment. Like, you coach guys who wear yarmulkes on their head, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you been there now?
So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. So this is my second season at Yeshiva University, but I got there because of a guy named Tamir Goodman. Tamir's been one of my good friends since high school. So he was probably one of the first Jewish people I've ever met, probably the only Jewish person I've ever met growing up, being honest with you. And how it's so even during my time that I was going through my depression, it was weird because me and Tamir always had this connection where even there are times I wouldn't talk to nobody, he would always check on me. We've always stayed in contact from high school until now.
And Tamir was known as the Jewish Jordan. That's at least what we call him.
The Jewish Jordan.
A really fascinating player with a really interesting story also. So.
Yes. So he was the one that, we stayed in contact. So how it started was when he had moved to Israel, and he said, "Hey, I got this camp called Camp Ramah in the Poconos. It's my baby. I started it, the basketball program there. Can you run it for me?" I said, "Sure, no problem." He said, "Yeah, it's an overnight camp." I said, "Oh, okay." I'm just being honest. So I didn't know what to expect. I'm just being honest. I didn't know what to expect.
You had to sleep overnight with Jews, and you had barely met us.
I didn't know what to expect because that actually it was more so. I didn't know how I was going to be perceived. To be honest with you, I knew, you guys, they were in their comfort zone. So I'm coming into their comfort zone. So I just didn't know what to expect. And so my kids, actually, my wife and kids went with me, and then. Amazing experience. Probably as soon as I got there, they took my kids. They had a blast. I didn't see them all day, every day. They were just gone every day, having a blast, swimming. You name it, they were doing it.
Yeah, no, those kind of summer camps they're amazing. Yeah.
And so that's how I started for me getting it. So we're kind of so I was there for about a month, and obviously met a lot of good people there, created some relationships, and word of mouth started to happen. And I started getting invited to different camps, different clinics. So I went to Israel, not this summer, the summer before last. I went to Israel to visit Tamir for his camp.
Wow.
So I was there with him for a week. And he made a call to Coach Elliot Steinman. She's like, "Hey, Mike is living in New York now. You think he should, he want to coach there?" And Elliot's like, "That's a no-brainer." So I had a conversation with Elliot over the phone. We hit it off immediately. We had great conversations and came back, and it was a done deal. And kind of that, I think me going to Israel with Tamir and taking Camp Ramah changed my life in so many ways for me and my family.
How'd you like Israel?
When he first invited me to Israel, I was nervous because what you see on the news, you think it's this most dangerous place. So I didn't know what to expect. So I got there, and it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. And I think the thing that shocked me the most was, me and Samir laughed at this story. We were coming back from a camp like up north. Mm-hmm. It's about 12 o'clock at night. And we were walking back to our apartment, and I saw some kids playing in a park at 12:30 at night by themselves. So I asked Samir, I was like, "Where's the family at? Where's their parents at?" He's like, "Oh, they probably somewhere in the house." I said, "They let them come outside by themselves?" He's like, "Yeah." Then the next day, I'm seeing kids like walking to the store by themselves, doing grocery shopping. I'm like, "What's going on?" I was like, "How's this a dangerous place?" It's more like, I might go back home. I'm not sending my kids to a park by themselves or to the store by themselves. So it was such a peaceful place. I visited the Western Wall. it was a great experience. Hopefully when things get better, I can't wait to take my family there with me so we can go back again. But amazing. And I think that's what really changed and really kind of got me comfortable in the community accepting me. Now it's, people always say it's a running joke, like, I know you're not Jewish, but you're still one of us. Like, people tell me that joke all the time. But
many Jews have never been to Israel. You're doing great. That's awesome.
But I love it though. I love it.
We pulled up a bunch of stats before this interview just to the impact of depression and anxiety and the potential for suicide for athletes as well as people who are 10 to 34. And I won't go into the stats now, but it's shocking. It's the second leading cause of death for people 10 to 34 years old. And you've been very vocal about your struggles and you've been very open. You've been a motivational speaker. What would you say to the people, anyone who is experiencing something right now and trying to hold it in, who hasn't found that avenue on how to process it yet? Because I think that's a dangerous place for people to be in. And I think there are more people out there like that than we really even recognize. And the conversation is just starting, which is, why we're here today.
No, so thank you for bringing that up. So when I go visit, high schools and colleges and, even middle schools, I kind of let it be known, your age group is, believe it or not, people just automatically assume an adult will go through it more. But I say, no, your age group statistically shows that you guys, go through the depression, anxiety more than anybody. And I just kind of share with them, look, you're still young, just at an age where, obviously you're still trying to figure it out, trying to figure out if, where you're going to go with school, college, next job, being accepted by friends, social media, as I've learned, social media with youth has been, the stories I hear from kids, it's sad. It's really sad that, a kid, they post pictures just to try to get accepted and they don't. They want to harm themselves because they're not accepted. And it's actually sad. So I just try to tell my message to most, people in that age group is look, just live your life for you. Be the best you and live with your results. You're not going to please everybody. You're not going to make everybody happy. Not to be blunt and not to be harsh, but, we have to learn how to deal with adversity. A lot of youth don't know how to deal with adversity. Me, for example, at 20 years old, I got hit with something. I didn't know how to deal with it. Luckily now there's so much out there, information, people, organizations trying to help and put the information out there to the kids so they can instill it. So I just try to tell kids, let's educate each other as much as possible on mental health, the importance of it. Because a lot of times, we spend so much time trying to work out and take care of our bodies and do this stuff. But, we got to take care of our mental first because that carries everything. It takes care of everything. So definitely thank you for bringing it up because that is something that is dear to my heart, especially with the youth, because I hear so many sad stories often, get messages and it's saddening. But hopefully with the most information and changing that stigma of pushing positivity in our world, I think that can just hopefully better things a little bit with that stat. Hopefully we can lower those numbers.
And the positivity and the conversation is such a huge part of this, and I think an underlooked part, because the level of isolation people feel when they're in that state makes them feel totally alone in the world. And to know that someone else has gone through this, to know that they can find someone that they can open up to and not be looked at like they're crazy or something's wrong with them, and instead that they need help and this is a natural part of learning how to deal with adversity, is that you might get hit with something that you're just totally knocked over by, and that doesn't mean you can't get up again.
And also another thing too, I also always, when I had this conversation, I say exactly everything we said just now, but also always mention to friends, hey, if you see a friend that's going through it, it's not only just the person that's going through it, but if you see a person struggling, be there for them, ask some questions, try to support them, because, don't be that person where you see somebody struggling, you don't say anything, you don't try to help, just try to be there for that person too. So, it's definitely, a two-way street where it's, because I think a lot of times, especially with that age group, the chance of them going straight to a counselor or to a doctor right away is probably slim. Most of the times it starts where they're comfortable with their friends. So that's why I say friends are very, very vital on helping that person get to the point where they can get professional help if it's needed. So that's why I try to stress to friends, hey, you guys are so important in this process.
Well, I think it's just so important that current athletes, former athletes have such a vital role in this, because they have up until now and continue to be perceived as these untouchable, perfect people who just are constantly performing and constantly focused and constantly on, and to show the range of humanity, which does include emotions and does include a complex inner world, and letting kids know that even if you're striving to be the best in whatever field it is, that you can have this experience and be okay, and that there are resources out there is really a message that needs to continue.
I wonder, was there some moment that you decided to be public about this, or did it kind of happen for you? Because, I think this is, we see what happens when, people like Meta World Peace, even people like Dennis Rodman, back in the day, when I think of how we, the public, treated Dennis Rodman, just even in his eccentricity, and the level of, kind of media hysteria and ridicule that he experienced, really for being himself, and yes, in very public and outrageous ways. But I wonder, was there a moment where you thought, I should just go through this on my own and kind of like disappear and just let it, fade? I got my wife, I got my kids. Like, what made you decide to sort of advocate and really speak up? Especially, it's hard to speak up, when you're out, meaning, when you're in, when you're in the NBA and something happens, and like K-Love and, all these guys, like, yeah, that's super, super brave. But the decision to do that when you don't have that as like what's behind you, it must have been so complicated. I wonder what that was like and what made you decide to do that.
Great question. So what happened? I was kind of forced in that, but not forced. I was forced, but I was, I made that decision. It was like a little bit of both. So what happened was back in 2014 or 15, I was playing in this basketball tournament, and Mark Berman from the New York Post, he actually covered me when I was with the Knicks. He was doing an interview with me. And he was like, it's one of those things, we haven't seen you in years, your career didn't go the way you wanted to go. And, he was just start talking. And he's like, just started seeing all this stuff that was on the internet about me that's not true. That I was lazy and I was this. And so people just wrote stories about me because they didn't know what was going on. It was like, how can this guy go from this player in college to the NBA? It doesn't work out. And so people just wrote their own stories. And I kind of got tired of people writing my story. So I was like, look, at this point, I don't care what it's going to get me. I didn't know what to expect. Still at that time, wasn't sure about the mental health conversation around 14, 15. It was talked about, but not the way it is now. And so I was like, look, during the time I was playing in the NBA, suffered from depression. I was suicidal. That stuff that was written about me, I was put in bad situations, and I just didn't have an outlet. I suffered from depression. I was suicidal. So that's what happened to me. And he wrote the story, published it the next day. I happened to go on my Facebook page, and I got crazy amount of alerts. I'm like, what is happening? Because I didn't know he published it the next day. Usually sometimes writers say, hey, we can already publish the story. We'll let you know. He didn't tell me he published it. So I'm like, what is happening? So it was so much love and feedback. Oh, you're so brave. Thank you for telling me this. I had no clue. Like, wow. And then people telling me their testimonies, their stories. So I'm like, I was like, wow. So at that point, I knew what I was going through, and I was struggling. At that point, I was a lot better mentally. And I kind of felt like, wow, I wasn't alone. Because during that time, I felt like I was different from everybody else. I felt like I was in a lone stratosphere, like I'm just this weird, depressed guy. And come to find out, like, wow, everybody at some point has reached depression, reached anxiety. No matter, I don't know, every level is different, but at some point, somebody has reached that. And I'm like, wow, I'm not alone. And that just gave me, like, this is my purpose right here in life. Like, obviously, a basketball player is a stepping stone, but right now, just every day, literally that's my job. I go out to homeless shelters, drug abuse centers, all that, and just share my story, helping, and and I have a reoccurring place where I go every week, where I visit people so they can see me and see that I care. This is what I do, and it's just been a great journey. But that was what kind of changed me to. That's what made me make that decision. I was kind of forced because I got tired of people writing my story. And I was like, you know what, here it is. This is what's going to happen. And it actually turned into a blessing.
What was your father's name?
Oh, Samuel Sweetney.
What an honor to your father that you are. It's really, really inspiring. And it's such a pleasure and an honor to speak to you. Your journey is unbelievable. And, it's what you did with it that really, honors his memory. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And then the stories that I hear from people that he's worked with or come across, you're just like your father. You have no clue. Like your father was a person that would get a shirt off his back. He always wanted to help people. He was always there for people. And that's just like, wow, like I'm keeping his thing going. So that makes me proud. Thank you.
That's awesome. What a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys for having me. This has been awesome.
I've met a lot of basketball players. Like when I would go to the NBA All-Star games and that whole thing, like you'd be in the elevator with them and it was so exciting. I sat next to Michael Jordan. We were both interviewed.
And if you haven't heard the Jaleel White episode, there is an amazing Karl Malone story in there. Go check it out.
In any event, I mean, he was everything that I wanted an NBA player to be when you talk to them one-on-one. He said all his feelings. What a fascinating guy.
And what amazing work he's doing in, he didn't really champion how much he's out there talking to people, being a motivational speaker, but he's out there on the front lines of really trying to make a difference in people's lives, and we just have to take our hats off to that.
And I have to say, there's a particular passion that people who are driven by a religious or spiritual purpose tend to have, I have found. Meaning, this is someone who lost his beloved father, and he literally went through this. He went through hell. Like, he thought that he should die. Like, he took pills so that he didn't have to wake up, And to turn that into, I'm going to get help. I'm going to do these things. And his wife is a tremendous support. I mean, that woman, that's its own episode. I would love to talk to that woman. There's a sense about, and I'm not saying that you have to be religious. That's not what this is about. But there's a sense about him that is like, I'm going to transform this tragedy to literally make the world a better place, one day at a time. Like, not just by being healthy for yourself, for your kids, for the people who love you, but to put yourself out. I mean, it makes me emotional to think that, like, he goes to homeless shelter. Like, that's what it means to, like, hit the pavement, This is not just a public service announcement that he's doing, which is also great. I love when people do public service announcements. But this is a man who also has I really wanted to ask about this, but I was nervous. He was both removed from the spotlight and also removed himself from the spotlight. And, the part about, like, going to, like, this Jewish summer camp, right? Like, for those of us who've been to those kind of, like, Jewish community things, like, I know what that was like for him. He was probably like, who are these people? Like, what's happening? But he was embraced by a community that wanted him to succeed, and he seized on that, He's got his job. He coaches. Like, he just seems like a really, really kind person who's been through something so significant. I mean, I just find him so inspiring.
It's so important to find those people who believe in us and who want us to succeed. The way that he talked about
that faith
the
someone had in
Georgetown
him.
Experience where someone had faith in him, and he just, it meant so much to him.
The saddest thing that I thought, which I also didn't say because it didn't feel appropriate to say to him. I don't know if the NBA knows how, or any real structure like that knows how to have people who are struggling and vocal like that.
Well, it's really hard because even when Paul George hit the back of the backboard or side of the backboard in the bubble, and people are like, "Oh, he had talked about it," and so it's almost will be used against you.
Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure. So Paul George had been struggling in the bubble. Clippers had a very publicized meltdown, gave up a 3-1 lead to Denver. Basically fell apart, and in one of those end games, Paul George hits the side of the backboard, taking a
That's not a good thing for those of you.
It is really off target.
Yeah.
And Paul George had been public about experiencing depression in the bubble.
So what did everybody say?
Everyone says, great, be depressed, but don't hit the side of the backboard.
Take your problems elsewhere. Don't mess up my game.
Or you have to be a professional enough to compartmentalize and go out and do your job.
Well, guess what? Mental health doesn't know.
It's very well. This is where I was getting to. The compartmentalization is, Isaiah Thomas, for example, is very famous for having his sister had died and tragically, horrifically, and he then went out that next day and played and sort of used that as his outlet and but I think that that intense compartmentalization, I'm not suggesting that players shouldn't go out when they're having trouble, like that's not possible, but is that compartmentalization, is that packing it away for that moment, does that increase the tension that we're experiencing?
Well, and also, what kind of expectation does that set up? Because Isaiah Thomas may have been able to do that, but Michael Sweetney may not have been able to do that. And what does that also say about our perception of sports figures? And yes, Black men, to say, I want you all to behave the way I want you to behave. If you're having a hard time, I want it to make you a better player, right?
Well, so I'm gonna say that that extrapolates to the corporate world. You know, I've had bosses say, "Oh, you're having a hard time. Your marriage isn't going well." That's when I double down on work and I work 90 hours a week so that I
That
don't
may
have to
work
think
for
about it.
some people.
Well, I from what I've seen, it works until you crash and you can't compartmentalize anymore.
Japan is a fantastic example with the highest suicide rates, right, in the world.
And intense culture of
A
work
culture of
productivity.
put your stress into your work.
Yeah.
Make your work your stress.
So I'll say that it's not that it can't be done. It's not that it's not beneficial in some time, but it does set a dangerous precedent of not addressing the core issue and trying to power through. And I don't think powering through works all the time.
To me, that's what Michael Sweetney was really, helping flesh out. When and where are we allowed to have mental health problems? When is it acceptable to our bosses? When is it acceptable to our colleagues? When is it acceptable to our girlfriends, our friends?
Well, he left the NBA to really take his mental health seriously. And, at that time, that was probably the right answer.
Also faced terrible criticism for what happened to his body. And part of it, which he's spoken about, we didn't get into today, is that he was eating, he was self-soothing, And of course, all we see is, he looks like a bus, like, oh, no wonder anyway, yeah.
Mayim, let's do an Ask Mayim Anything.
Okay. Ask Mayim Anything. Yeah.
We're going to do a combo Ask Mayim Anything that is brought to us by two different listeners. Jake asks, and I think you can merge these topics. So Jake asks, how to bring up topics of therapy with family and how to ask for help. And Julia asks, how do we help family members with mental illness issues? I see the underlying question being, how do we help bring up topics like therapy? And then how do we help people who are struggling?
Just so I can clarify, do you mean if someone else needs therapy or bringing up that you would like to go to therapy?
The question doesn't specify specifically, but I think it's more, especially given this episode, it's more around if someone needs help, if you need help or someone else needs help, how do you start to bring up those questions and be supportive?
I think in general, when trying to figure out how to broach these kind of topics, one of my general guidelines is to use I statements. Because especially if someone's struggling, it's very, very hard to hear you this, you that. I'm noticing that you blah, blah, blah. So an I statement is not, I'm noticing that you're a wreck, right? An I statement would be, I've been noticing that in our interactions, we're not connecting like we usually do. I'm noticing that we don't seem to do the same things that we used to do together. That's if someone is isolating. So I think trying to keep it about your experience of either missing or wanting to, interact with the other person. I think that's more powerful than sort of, as we say, reading them their inventory, saying, you're doing this, you're doing that, especially if it's someone who's struggling with alcoholism or addiction, saying, you drink too much,
That never goes well.
That never goes well, and that should be remembered. So I think what I know from personal experience is you can't make anyone go to therapy. It is something that person does have to come to on their own. If someone is a danger to themselves or others, there's obviously a very different protocol. But part of what I'd like to advocate for is keeping the focus on yourself and your wellness when someone else is struggling, meaning they still need to to have their own process. And we don't know what someone's bottom is. You know, that's an expression we use in alcoholism, but we don't know what someone's emotional bottom is either. I think it's always important. I have someone in my family who is really she's not in touch with me the way I'd like her to be, but telling her that is not necessarily helpful. But saying to her, I miss our interactions. I miss being able to hear what's going on in your life. That's preferable to me saying, you seem to be isolating. You're not calling me. What's wrong with you? So I hope that that's generally helpful. That's a hard question.
It is a hard question. We'll take away I statements, and we thank both our listeners and thank everyone so much for all the amazing questions that have been coming in at
We got a lot to go.
bialikbreakdown.com.
BIA
Breakdown.com,
breakdown.
where you can ask Mayim anything. Thank you.
This was a really wonderful episode. And Jonathan, there's no one that I would have shared this episode with more than you, a person who loves basketball and who loves mental health as much as I do. From my breakdown to the one I hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two.